sentence is, that person over there, far from both of us, is my Japanese language teacher. So, are wa, because we haven't learned person yet, so are wa, if you had written ano kata or ano hito,
I did that one. Ano
wa,
hito.
that's fine too. We haven't studied that yet, but if you wanted to use that to replace are, that's fine. So are wa, and then my Japanese language teacher would be?
Sensei no Nihongo? Nihongo no sensei.
Okay, watashi
No.
Watashi no Nihongo
No sensei.
Nihongo no sensei desu. There you go.
The way
It needs the whole thing.
my brain
Right.
is like wired to list things like English, so I put sensei no and Nihongo and says like Japanese. I get to keep remembering myself. It's Japanese.
Yeah, that's why we practice, because you have to break those habits.
I used the that part I didn't use. I just used that part, and then I said wa asoko desu yo.
Oh, okay.
That
So,
works.
watashi no Nihongo no sensei wa asoko desu yo.
Desu yo, yeah. Does that works?
That works.
Okay,
That actually
I
works.
understood like you wanted to, specifically that
Yeah.
person, but like
Yeah.
that still works because like in Japanese they don't have that ability in English where we can put the subject at the tail end and make it sort of like a spoiler.
Yeah. I would translate that one a little differently. Minasan, keep it kudasai. This is going to be helpful to everybody, so listen. He put watashi no Nihongo no sensei wa asoko desu. That works. It's slightly different translation in English. Okay, in English, I would translate that as my Japanese language teacher is over there, versus that person over there is my Japanese language teacher. So just like in English, the word order can be swapped around, but anytime you've got, basically this is a, wa, be, des, right? That's the basic structure we're working with here, right? If you want to say be, wa, a, des, that really is 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right? They're equivalent sentences. If you're saying A equals B, then obviously B equals A is equally correct, right? In if I'm asking for a literal translation on a test or something, I would prefer that if the English sentence is A, wa, B, des, that you translate it that structure rather than the reverse. That would be my first choice. But if it's a question of would you still get credit, you would still get at least partial credit for doing it the other way around. I'm looking for it this way because I want to see that you understand the equivalency. But if you at least got the gist of the meaning right, that's good. So that's at least some credit, okay?
I guess like in the way you asked for it, like the A version, I
Yeah.
guess that's like saying it's like saying if we weren't already talking about the Japanese teacher, you would say just like you would almost be like if somehow you spotted them on sitting in a bench and you point them out like that person over there, that's fine. But I guess the version I went was sort of like we're already talking about this person.
Yeah.
And,
A is more like, oh, by the way, see that person over there? That's my Japanese teacher. Versus, oh, you wanted to know which one's my Japanese teacher? Oh, there she is.
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess because I obviously was looking at the exercises that we did with like
Right.
pointing out like what is that over there,
Yeah.
how much is it? Like
Okay,
that,
so, but you get the idea, right? They both work. Does everybody understand the structures we're talking about here? Okay, and this whole thing, the fact that you can reverse some parts of sentences and have it still come out grammatically correct, that's something that we're going to talk about with other kinds of structures too now. Because this very simple structure, A, wa, B, des, that's what they taught us in lesson 1, right? But now in lesson 3, we're actually going to learn slightly more complex sentence structures, and you're going to find out that those parts also sometimes can move around. Hi.
Would the Oswald version still
そこは私の日本語の先生です. It sounds odd. It would get your point across, but I don't think a native speaker would ever say it that way. It just sounds weird. You know, it's, yeah, it's just not normal to do it that way. But certainly, if you're tongue-tied and that's what you can come out with, that's better than standing there and not saying anything when somebody just asks you a question, right? Yeah, and by the way, another thing that's better than just not saying anything is or either one of those is like and it at least acknowledges that you heard the question, you are attempting to answer it, but you may or may not have all the vocabulary figured out in your head yet.
Not like this.
Yeah.
Not like cross-eyed and gaping
Yeah.
mouth.
So, yeah, it's better to acknowledge the question in some sense, and, you know, and then answer works. If you still haven't got how you want to say it together, you could say like, ちょっと待ってください. And that gives you a little more time to think about what it is you want to actually put together to answer the question. If, on the other hand, you're saying because you didn't really understand what they asked you, you can say もう一度言ってください. Please say it again. Or ゆっくり言ってください. Please say it slowly. Maybe you didn't catch it because it went by, you know. And other times they might have said it slowly enough for you, but you didn't know some of those words. And if you were able to catch 90% of the sentence, but there was one word in there you couldn't catch, if you can catch it well enough to repeat it back, even though you don't know what it means, you could say that word, wa nan desu ka? That's the easiest way to say, what is that? You know, or that word, wa eigo de nan desu ka? What is that word in English? You know, if hopefully your friend that you're talking to knows enough English to help you with that. You know, so that is one of the strategies you can use. Now, you guys may have noticed this doohickey on the desk here. I'm actually recording right now, and my plan is to use you guys kind of as guinea pigs, and I'm going to upload this to a YouTube channel that I made just for this course. And we're going to see if having access to my explanations of grammar to re-listen to afterwards, if that helps you in your studying. Okay, so I'd like some feedback after you've listened to it again to see, and obviously it'll be a resource if you miss class, but also my thinking is if I explain, for example, time reference and particles and masenka and word order content now, and then you get home and you're trying to do the homework and you totally draw a blank on how you're supposed to do some of that stuff, and you're trying to do the workbook for it, if you can re-listen to this same explanation that I'm about to give you, maybe that will help you do better with the homework and understand it better so that hopefully you actually do better on the quiz next class and so on. Hi.
So you're gonna like do the lessons, but record us and then put on YouTube.
I'm recording it right now.
Oh, like right now?
Yeah, it's on. It's on. And yeah, the goal is to upload it as soon as possible after class, if it'll let me.
So it's only audio, no video.
So far, I've only got audio. I've requested a tablet so that I'd actually be able to write on the tablet and have that also show up so that if I'm writing an example sentence, for example, on the board, instead of writing it on the board, I'd be writing on something that's going to project, and it would also be what you see when you open that video. Right now, I've just got a random page from the Genki Self-Study Room open, just as a sort of hint that you can also go there for extra practice. Hi.
Is the link to it on Angel?
Not yet, but it's going to be. That's the plan. This is the first time I've done it. I just got my Camtasia training this morning, and so we are testing it out for the first time. You guys are my guinea pigs. Okay, and if it works, the goal will eventually be to create a whole body of videos that explain various things so that in class we can have more time just for 练习, where you talk to each other in Japanese and I come around and help you guys with things that you're struggling to say. Because the goal is to make this more conversation-oriented as a course so that you get more opportunities to practice speaking and listening, and when you go to Japan you feel like you've actually got some tools to use. Because my assumption is that the people who are serious about these courses are hoping to go to Japan at some point and really put this to real-life use. Okay, so let's talk about some grammar. So first of all, verb conjugation. Were there any questions after the way I explained it last time and you started doing the homework? Did you get stuck on anything? Was there anything you couldn't figure out how to do?
In some cases, when it was something like suru, I was stuck between should I conjugate with the ru or with the su. Then Blake helped me out, and it became shimas,
Right.
and then shimasen.
Exactly.
And then kuru became kimas, and then kimasen.
Right, because those two are the what?
Irregular?
Irregular verbs, right. So they don't follow the patterns that the others follow. Hi.
There was one more irregular verb that I didn't know how to do.
Okay.
To study.
To study?
Yeah.
Benkyo.
So,
Benkyo what?
Suru.
Benkyo suru. Okay. The reason I said that there are only two irregulars in the whole language is because all the verbs that take suru, this is really a noun that has suru attached to it in order to verb it. Okay, it made it a verb by adding suru. Therefore, you're only conjugating the suru part, which conjugates to shimasu, shimasen. So, benkyo shimasu, benkyo shimasen. You just treat it as a compound, and the first part doesn't change. Only the suru changes to shimasu, shimasen, etc., etc., etc. Hi. He had his hand up.
I was getting Leslie's help with basically where to put everything in a sentence. Like the first one on the practice in the textbook, it talks about like where do you put home and time and all that stuff. And obviously the book has the time, place, object, verb structure for you. But this was sort of weird because it had so I guess I wrote the sentence out. I'm not sure if it's correct per se, but it used de as one of the particles, and that was why it threw me off, because I was like, okay,
We didn't talk about de yet.
And that's so it was yoji han ni uchi de. Oh wait.
Yeah. Yuji han ni uchi de.
Kikimasu. That's what it said.
That works.
Okay.
Okay, and we are going to talk more about sentence structure, but I wanted to first just make sure nobody else had questions about verb conjugation specifically. Hey.
I was listening to the CD to check the answers on the practice for the textbook.
Yep.
And for number 1 under B, it had something like edu teifu. And I was like, I don't understand. I understand teifu, but edu.
Huh?
Yeah. Edu. Okay. Yeah.
Textbook.
Okay.
Page 9.
Edu
Okay, I see.
is sometimes written edu like that, sometimes written with the English letters, but it's short for language rabu.
Oh. Edu.
But for that, I don't understand that, because for the one it was 4 is home 4:30 listening to music.
Because the CDs, I think, did not get up, or you're using the non-updated version, aren't you? Are you using the version from this textbook?
Yeah.
From the physical book that you got out of the CD in the back? Did everybody have the same experience? Did they all say elu elu instead of?
I didn't listen.
Okay. It may be that when they changed to the new edition, they neglected to update some of the audio files.
I was just wondering, I wrote it down.
Because
with,
the
like, but-
example is one that I remember being in the old textbook. And it doesn't look like they have continued to use it, probably because language labs have sort of gone out of fashion now that most people have easier access to
The internet.
internet and audio equipment to do their own listening.
I might have used the wrong one, because I have my version and I
Yeah.
have a CD, but I don't,
Yeah.
I thought I used the CD version.
Well, you might want to double check and just
Okay.
find out, but it's possible, because I haven't listened to the new edition CDs lately. It's possible that there are some discrepancies, that they didn't fix all the audio files that they should have fixed. Because I believe that even on the website, they didn't necessarily change all the videos and things that are on there. By the way, did everybody know you can look at the Genki website to get video versions of the Kaiwa? So if you want more context for the things they're talking about in the dialogues at the front of every chapter, you can actually watch videos of those dialogues happening with native speakers saying those lines and pretending to be exchange students in some cases, which is sometimes humorous since they're all native Japanese speakers. Okay.
Can you give us like a sentence and then ask us to say it, maybe to practice?
Sure. Let's first make sure nobody else has questions about grammar, and then we can do some practice.
Okay.
Okay? So,
My observation was when you said the other files are outdated. Wow.
I don't know for sure, but
I had a version that I had been sent by a friend, so it could have gotten mixed up.
Yeah.
But everything else on that CD was completely correct within the book, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
they only changed minor pieces of most of the exercises, so it may be that they just overlooked one, you know, because they probably didn't re-record all of the exercises. They probably just re-recorded the ones that they changed, and it's possible that they just missed one.
Well, at least we know. Well, at least you'll know for your fall classes.
Yeah, okay, so verb types in the present tense. Any questions about the different uses of present tense, the way they're explained in the textbook? Okay?
Present affirmative is what you are doing now,
Yes, and
and
then
negative is
masen.
Well, you're
must
not.
say.
So
you're not
if you
gonna do it.
say, for example, sushi o tabemasen, it could either mean I will not eat sushi, or it could mean I don't eat sushi, as in habitually, I just normally don't eat it.
I don't.
Hi.
There were some examples, I don't know what it is, but masen was used to apply to a verb as a question.
Yes, masenka. Yes, let's talk about that. That is one of the structures. Masenka. Think about in English, when you ask somebody a question, like, will you eat this?
And here it is.
Versus, won't you eat this? What's the difference in meaning in your mind?
Page 92.
It's
Are
like
you willing
likelihood
to-
that.
Are you
It could be, are you willing to, or it could also be something closer to, would you like to? Right? Like an invitation. Masenka in Japanese is usually construed as an invitation to do something. Sushi o tabemasen ka? Won't you please eat some sushi? And the reason a negative ending like that is a politer invitation is because it allows the person to say yes to refuse instead of saying no to refuse, which you would expect, right? You can say, "Ya, kekko desu. I'm fine." You can say, "Iie tabemasen." But if you're asking with masenka, you can actually say, "Hai tabemasen." I know, scrambles the brain, right? But yeah, if somebody asks, "Sushi o tabemasen ka?" and they're holding out a platter of sushi to you, eagerly waiting for you to take some and enjoy it. "Sushi o tabemasen ka?" "Hai tabemasen." Yes, I don't eat it. As in, I'm allergic to it, or I don't like it, or whatever. You don't have to give an explanation. But by being able to use hai instead of ie, that's more comfortable and more polite in a culture where saying no is close to rude sometimes. Okay, hai.
In the dialogue, which I'm assuming that's where she got the think kind of part from,
Yeah.
this word taite, is there that what taite?
Taite is one of the frequency adverbs. It means usually, yes.
Okay, that is,
Is there another way of saying that? Usually?
Taite, well, itsumo is always.
That's, no,
Yeah.
there's another one.
Taite, tokidoki is sometimes. Yoku is often.
What was the first one you said?
Itsumo?
Itsumo. I think that's sometimes you said?
No, itsumo is always.
Always.
I think they taught several of these in the vocab list. I don't remember exactly which ones, but itsumo,
I don't think I got that one.
taite, sorry, that should be bigger. Taite, tokidoki.
It's like you're saying okie dokie.
Hi, itsumo, taite, tokidoki. Oh, sorry, yoku should be in here. Yoku. In terms of how frequent, itsumo means always, all the time, like 100% or 99% of the time. Taite is usually like maybe 80 or 90%. Yoku is often maybe like 75, 60%, somewhere around there. Tokidoki is sometimes, like maybe 50-50, 50% of the time. And then the two that they taught that take negative endings, I believe these are in this chapter.
Yes.
Amari.
Amari and zenzen.
Does that mean
I-
add janai this to the end?
Zenzen, yeah, then you need a negative ending. So, amari tabemasen, for example.
Okay.
Tabemasen. So, 私は寿司をあまり食べません. I usually don't eat sushi, is basically what that would translate as. 全然食べません would be I never eat it. I don't eat it. So for example, sushi は全然食べません. I don't eat sushi at all. Maybe because I hate fish, or maybe because I'm allergic to some ingredient that's central to sushi. You know, hi.
I've heard zenzen used on its own as a response to a question instead of
Yeah.
anything following it.
Yeah, that's very colloquial slang, but yes, you can. So like, somebody asks you, do you ever do X, Y, Z? Zen. No, never. Okay?
It's more rude.
It's very casual, so in appropriate circumstances, it's not bad, but in the wrong circumstances, it definitely could come across as rude. That's the tricky part about Japanese, is almost anything is acceptable to say in the appropriate circumstance. But in the wrong circumstance, that exact same thing that used to be acceptable all of a sudden turns rude. And it goes both directions. If you're overly polite and formal with your best friend, it could be a joke, it could be taken as sarcastic and in a joking, friendly kind of way, or it could be taken as you giving them the cold shoulder, you're giving them the brush off. I don't like you anymore, you're not my friend.
Huh?
Yeah, if you're overly polite to somebody, it could be taken that way. That's why my friend was insulted when I kept using san on her name when I had already stopped using san on our other mutual friend's name. And she asked me one day, how come you're still calling me san and you never call Yoko-san san anymore? And I went, oh, okay, I can swap san off your name too,
It's like a distancing thing.
Yeah, it's a distancing thing. It's keeping you at arm's length. I don't like you that much, So, so zenzen by itself is fine when you're talking to a close friend. Somebody asks you, I don't know, yoku sushi o taberu would be the casual form of that question. Do you often eat sushi? Zenzen, no, never. Okay, like that. But don't answer a sensei, for example, with just zenzen. That's too rude in that circumstance. Yeah, there are big differences depending on the relative social positions of the people involved in any given conversation, and that's something that takes a lot of practice to master. So, be careful if most of your Japanese is coming from anime, because there's a lot of casual language going on in those, and if that's how you talk, you're going to offend people. Because you can't talk to everybody the way your favorite anime character talks to his best friend.
It's like going, yo, bro, how you doing, man? Cat.
Exactly. There are times when that's appropriate and times when it's totally inappropriate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So if everybody is okay with that stuff, particles. We didn't get a chance to talk about de or ni last time, right? We talked about ni as a directionality particle, party ni ikimasu, but we didn't get to talk about it as a time indicator, and we didn't get a chance to talk about de at all.
Yeah, I looked at some of that when we were doing the homework.
Yeah, so de basically is going to be used to indicate the place at which you are doing some kind of action. So for example, restaurant de sushi o taremasu. Eating sushi at a restaurant. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Party de sake o nomimasu. Drinking sake at the party, or at a party. There's no difference between a and the in Japanese. They don't do articles. They do particles, but not articles. Okay, any questions about de? I think application is going to be where questions come up, and that's when we'll talk more about it. Ni, besides being a goal of movement particle, you can think of the other ni as like a homophone, a homonym. It's not the same particle, but it just happens to be pronounced exactly the same and written exactly the same. But it's a completely different purpose. So you can think of them as two separate pieces. Okay? This ni is marking what they call specific time, meaning it's something that you can define with a clock or a calendar. Okay, so for example, doyobi ni on Saturday, or shichiji han ni at 7:30. Okay, those are the kinds of time phrases you use with ni. Okay, if it's non-specific or relative time, such as a frequency adverb, don't use ni. Frequency adverbs don't take a particle at all. Also, the question word when, itsu, which sounds a lot like itsumo, itsu does not take a particle ni, or any particle normally. And certain types of time words that are relative, as in kyo, today, ashita, tomorrow, kino, yesterday, those don't take the particle ni, okay, because things that are non-specific and relative just don't take ni. So for example, if you're talking about kyo, if you say kyo right now, you mean Thursday, June 12th, right? But if you say kyo tomorrow, you're not going to mean Thursday, June 12th anymore. You're going to mean Friday the 13th, right? Yeah. Am I right? So do you see that? That's what they mean by relative time. Kyo does not mean the same thing every time you say it. It means the day that you're speaking about.
Tomorrow is the 13th.
Yeah.
So,
Hi.
like, for example, on the homework, I didn't put ni there, but for like Susan wa yoji ni,
Yes.
oh, sorry, yoji san, what was I saying? Yoji sanju
Yeah. Yoji 30分に. Yeah.
うちで音楽を聴きます。
Hi. That's exactly right. So you need the ni there because it's a specific time. 4時半 or 4時30分.
So
you
the
can
ni,
say it either way.
so the ni only applies to exact time.
Yeah, exact times like clock times and dates and days of the week. Okay, because those are specific, right? Where it gets a little fuzzy is if you have a word like goro time. So yoji han goro. Ni then becomes optional because it's on the fence. The yoji han part is specific. The goro part is sort of general. So some people put ni there, some people don't, and it truly is a personal preference type choice in that case. So if it's doubtful like that, you can decide for yourself whether or not you feel like ni goes there. But if it's definitely a definite time, like a clock time or a day of the week or a date in the month, use ni. If it's very non-specific or relative, like kyo, ashita, and so forth, don't use ni. Also frequency adverbs and the question word itsu. If it's one of those halfway in between ones, don't stress about it. Use it if you want to, don't use it if you don't want to. But you need to know the definite ones. That's more important. Hey.
So for, like, for example, saying Susan wa konban uchi, can you not put that after konban tonight?
Konban, you don't need ni,
Okay.
right? Because that's relative time again. That's more in the realm of kyo ashita, because konban means the night that we're experiencing today. It doesn't mean last night or tomorrow, it's only this night.
Okay.
And konban changes every night,
Okay.
right? Which date you mean by konban changes every time the date changes. So that falls in the same category with kyo. Height.
There's this example in the book that talks about coming and going and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and it says that iku is basically like moving in a direction away from the speaker.
Uh-huh.
If you were to say ike, which is like basically like telling
It's
them
like,
to
go away.
Yeah, is that usually going away? Like you never use ike for like, unless you maybe.
First of all, you gotta be really careful when you use ike, because that is a super rude way to say,
Oh, it's
get out of my face. You know, that's really like, go away and don't come back almost.
Yeah,
It's
like,
really
real
strong. You know, it's, you know, the kind of thing that if a 2-year-old said it to their mom, they would probably get punished, you know?
Like they get spanking for just
Yeah.
saying something rude.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying spanking, but, you know,
They
just
might
in
say
general.
something like
But
that.
ike is really strong. But ikimasu in general means going, the person saying it is going away from wherever they currently are. Kimasu is talking about someone coming to the speaker's current location. And kairimasu, like we said the other night, is talking about returning to a place that you call home, a place where you belong, a place where you live. Okay, so a good illustration of kimasu versus ikimasu that shows a cultural difference is in English, let's say you're at the other end of the house and somebody calls you and says, hey, dinner's ready. You'll say, I'm coming, right? In Japanese, you would say, hi, ikimasu. You would use ikimasu, not kimasu, because you are someplace else and you are going away from your current location in response to them calling you for dinner, right?
What if you're, I've heard like some ways you say, like when you're organizing a party and you're going on a trip with like a bunch of people, you say, ikuso.
Iku zo. Zo. With a 10-10. Zo is an emphatic ender, similar to yo. You remember yo? Like ikimasu yo, I'll go, for sure. Iku zo is more definite, stronger, and also more casual. Ikimasu zo, I've never heard. Okay, it's always with the short form, the casual form. Iku zo. Okay, so again, anime, you'll hear it a lot. Real life, you'll hear it a lot among friends, but it's not formal. That's why they're not teaching it yet, because we're not doing casual yet in this
Usually,
book.
if you're asking people to go with you, you just say ikoka instead of like.
Yeah, or ikimashouka is the formal version of that.
Is that a shorter version too?
Yeah, iko is again a casual form, casual speech. Okay, so iko and ikimashou are equivalent in meaning, but one's casual, the other's a little formal. Okay. Okay, so we talked about the particles. We talked about time reference taking ni versus time references that don't take ni. We talked about masenka. Word order. they're showing that in general, your topic, then a time or frequency adverb, time phrase or frequency adverb, some kind of time reference usually comes next, immediately after the topic. And then the place and the object and the verb, if you're talking about doing something in a certain place, or the goal of movement and the verb that indicates movement to or from a goal. Okay, so there are two, basically, we had the A, wa, B, des structure before, where A and B are both nouns, right? Or A is a noun and B might be an adjective, right? Like, sushi wa oishii desu. That would be an example of B being the adjective instead of a noun. But we talked about those where B is describing A, right? That was one structure. Now we have a structure where we've got A, wa, and then time with ni, unless it's a time word that doesn't require ni, right? And this could be a time with ni and or a frequency adverb, right? Which would not take ni. Okay? And then you can have a place, a location, de, and then another noun of some sort, o, and then your verb, right? So an example of that sentence structure would be, for example, okay,
New York?
私は4時半に図書館で本を読みます。I will read a book at the library at 4:30. Yeah, and in this case I used watashi as the subject, but it could just as easily be Mary さんは6時半にレストランで寿司を食べます。Right? You can do all kinds of things with that. The third structure they're showing us here is going to be a wa, and then again either a time or a frequency, and then place, et or ni, and then a verb that indicates movement. Okay? And it's important to distinguish between those because verbs like ikimasu, kimasu, and kaerimasu do not work in this structure that follows o. And verbs like tabemasu do not work in this structure that requires a verb of movement. Okay? This structure down here with place et or place ni requires a verb like ikimasu, kimasu, or kaerimasu. So for now, one of those three, because those are the only three you know that fall in that category, right? This other structure, place, de, noun, o, requires an action verb that isn't showing movement from one place to another. So, taremasu, yomimasu, nomimasu, okimasu actually doesn't take o. This part would be left out. Okay, so that's the other thing to point out to you. Nemasu and okimasu are two verbs that they're teaching you that don't take o. So this piece of the structure would have to be left out. You could say uchi de nemasu, to sleep at home, right? Watashi wa 10時半に家で寝ます. I sleep at home at 10:30 at night, right? You can do that part, but the noun o, there's no object because nemasu doesn't act on an object. The person doing it is the only thing being affected by it, right? Okay, you're not acting upon something when you choose to sleep or when you choose to wake up, right? You're not sleeping your alarm clock, you're just sleeping. You're not waking up your alarm clock, you're just waking up, versus eating sushi, reading a book. You see what I'm saying? So these two just don't take objects. Okay, so these are kind of their own separate little set of rules. Hi.
I noticed in this example under the word order thing that it says, I will study Japanese in the library today, and I will typically in English, that's past tense, or
Future
future
tense.
tense rather.
Yeah.
And past and future, and there's tenses probably in this
Yeah.
too, but is it mostly dependent on the frequency of adverb and not?
Yeah, if you want to indicate that you will do it at a certain time, you would usually put a time word. 私は、10時半にうちで日本語を勉強します。I'm going to study Japanese language tonight at my house at 10:30, right? But if you wanted to say that you frequently do that, not that you will do it tonight, but that you often do it in general, 私はよくうちで日本語を勉強します。I often study Japanese at my house. Okay? If you want to say that you often do it at a specific time, you can actually put the frequency adverb in front of the time phrase. So you can say, for example, 私はよく10時半にうちで日本語を勉強します。I often, at 10:30, at home, study Japanese. Okay, so if you want to get that specific, that you often do it at a particular time, you can. But that would require putting the frequency adverb in front of the noun.
In the absence of the frequency adverb, what happens then with the past?
If you just say, 私はうちで日本語を勉強します, no time phrase at all, it could mean either one depending on the context. It could mean that you often do it at that place, you frequently or habitually do it in that place at that time, or it could just mean that you're planning to do it later in the near future, like later today, later tomorrow.
You don't know the time, or you can't place it, like where
Yeah.
I do this, or
If
when.
there's no time phrase or frequency adverb
Then you just do
whatsoever,
present tense still?
then there is no separate future tense.
Okay.
This mas or masen ending is by definition either simple present or future tense. It's one or the other. There's no separation on the verb end of things. It's only if you get specific, you can indicate whether it's habit or future event. But there's no difference in the conjugation of the verb to indicate a difference between present tense and future tense.
So if somebody asks you, have you done this, and you say, I already did it.
Then you would need past tense, which we haven't learned yet.
Okay.
Next chapter. They actually separated out past tense from present tense because the four basic conjugations of Japanese are present positive, present negative, the two in this lesson, and past positive, past negative, the two in the next lesson. Those are the four fundamentals. Everything else kind of works around those. Okay, and then even the continuous tenses, you can later, we will learn how to do is doing, which would also be the same as will be doing, or was doing, which will work off of the te form plus the positives and the negatives in the present and the future, in the present and the past rather. So, but again, it all kind of boils down to a 2x2 grid for all the basics of Japanese. You've got mas endings, masu, masen. This is the positive, this is the negative, this is the non-past, this is the past, and then later we're going to learn the past ones are mashita and masen deshita. And all of the verbs do these four categories. When we get to conjugating adjectives, you'll find that although the way to conjugate them is different, they've got these four same categories, same little grid. Everything in the language, polite forms, casual forms, in-between forms, super polite forms, extra honorific forms, extra humble forms, all of them have these four versions of themselves, all of them.
Wow, this is giving me flashbacks of high school and freshman year Spanish.
Yeah. So, okay, so any other questions about the grammar of this current chapter?
Yes, so most of these masen, masu, and all that, they're mostly meant for the conjugations. They're also meant for like honorifics and polite.
No, what I'm saying is all of the other levels also conjugate in these four ways. The non-past positive and negative, the past positive and negative. But the mas, masen endings are what we call neutral polite. There are more polite ways of saying the same thing, and there are more casual ways of saying the same thing. This one is kind of the middle ground, which is why it's appropriate to learn first, both because it's the simplest conjugations you're ever going to get in Japanese, and because it is polite enough to use with strangers without offending them, and casual enough that friends of yours who understand that you're still not very good at Japanese won't be totally put off by you still using these forms until you get better at casual. Plus the fact that when you first get to Japan, how many close friends are you really going to have already, right? Mostly you're going to be meeting people for the first time and starting off at a level where mas, masen is the appropriate structure to be using. If you're meeting peers, people close to your own age for the very first time, mas, masen endings are the appropriate level of politeness to use. They also happen to be the easiest to learn and conjugate. So they're a good starting point for all of those reasons. Okay? And second semester, for those of you who go on, second semester is when we start working with casual speech and casual conjugations. And then third and fourth semesters, we get into honorific and humble and a lot of the more formal stuff. Because a lot of the time, you don't really encounter that very formal language until you're in the workplace or a customer in high-end shops and things. Even low-end shops, they use a lot of casual speech in daily life, but a lot of formal and honorific speech when you're a customer in a store, for example. You walk into Mitsukoshi Department or even McDonald's. Did you get it? Fast food place? McDonald's. Golden Arches.
Those
Yeah.
are the examples.
Yeah, if you go in there, you will hear honorific speech from the person at the cash register asking you, what would you honorifically like to eat? And if you don't know how to comprehend it when you hear it, you're going to have a hard time ordering it at McDonald's. So it's a good idea to learn that stuff, but they wait until the second textbook in the series to teach it because it is more challenging than the must-des forms that we're learning right now.
What was the word you used for fast food?
McDonald's is one specific fast food restaurant. Can you guess which one?
Yeah, McDonald's.
Hey,
I had to go to Google to look. I had to go to Google to look up the katakana.
Yeah,
I just put
McDonald's.
because I didn't know how to say it. And
yeah, sometimes they shorten it to Makudo.
Makuro.
Yeah, Makudo is like the equivalent of saying Mikidi.
Wait, isn't there a word for something named that's called maku in Japanese?
Maku is a mark, like,
Mark.
you know,
Mark.
yeah, like a, hi.
In the example in the book where
Yeah.
basically like she's playing tennis or
Tennis,
going
right.
to play tennis, I would assume you just use shimas as the verb
Yes.
to do tennis, but could you use to play or to
No.
have fun or
Yaru,
no?
you
No.
can't use yaru.
Yaru maybe, but not asobu, which is
I see
probably what
what
you're
was the
looking
one I was
at.
looking at. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, tennis or yarimas is sort of okay, but it's not the most normal way. The most common way to say it is tennis or shimasu.
So maybe if you were to leave the tennis out of the sentence and say you're having fun with your friends and they would ask, well, what are you doing? Then you'd say, I'm doing
Right,
tennis. Okay.
yeah, so, yeah, asobu, the verb to play, is generally used as a standalone verb to indicate doing things that are fun, or doing things for fun. So, tomodachi to asobimasu can mean to hang out with friends, because in English, we don't necessarily say to play with friends, once we're past around 10 or 12 years old, right? You know, if you say at 22 that you're going over to your friend's house to play, it sounds really weird. If you say that about my 3-year-old, it makes total sense, right? That he's going over to his friend's house to play. But in Japanese, they don't make a distinction based on age. So asobimasu means to play in the sense of going to someone's place to have fun, going out with friends to have fun, doing something for fun.
But nothing
But,
specific.
but nothing specific. All of the places where we would say like to play sports, to play an instrument, to play different games, they get divided among either verbs that take shimasu. So all the sports, for example, take shimasu. Terebi game wo shimasu. Can you guess what terebi game means? Terebi game, such as Nintendo, PlayStation.
PlayStation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were mentioning that. That's
Yeah.
why the commercials always go PlayStation in the background as soon as they close.
It's the Japanese pronunciation for it, yeah. So my point is, things that you play that are games or sports, generally you use shimasu. Instruments actually have specific verbs depending on the main action involved in playing the instrument correctly. So wind instruments all take fuku, to blow. Stringed instruments and pianos all take hiku, to pull, because you're plucking or pulling at the strings, right? And, well, piano is kind of a weird one, but it takes hiku also, for whatever reason. And drums and other percussion instruments take taraku, to hit. Or some, do they ever take utsu? I don't think so. I think it's usually taraku. So yeah, but they all take to hit, to play, to blow, or to pull for musical instruments. But other types of game activities like playing board games or Nintendo or tennis, they all take shimasu. Right?
I noticed one thing that in English, when we have like sound effects for like a heartbeat or a whisper or a creak,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, onomatopoeia.
Yeah, but in Japanese language, they use like the syllables like or something.
They use a lot of onomatopoeia in Japan, and it is generally written in katakana almost all the time. And if you are if you're a manga reader, look for it. Even in the English language translations of a lot of
I've seen
manga,
that.
you'll see the katakana because it's embedded in the picture usually, in the graphic, and it's written in crazy fonts a lot of the time. And whoever did the translation probably didn't even try to translate that part. But yeah, somebody who's in love is doki doki,
Yeah.
it's a heartbeat, or you got a big shock, dokan, or it's raining really hard, za za. There are a zillion of them. A rooster is kokekoko.
Wait, say that again?
Are they used in speech?
Yes,
Instead of, it's just
kokekoko. Yes, they are used in speech also. Yeah. 雨がザーザーと降っています。The rain is pouring down. That's the equivalent of saying it's raining cats and dogs. 雨がザーザーと降っています。はい。
Okay, Seth is telling me that pigs going in English, but they go
Boo 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 boo. Yes.
That sounds like they're